the Jonas Trust was formed to provide facilities for different groups and individuals to come away from it all and discover what God can make possible in their lives. The priority will be for younger children and for children and families who are most in need and least able to afford commercial rates. That was our first advertising brochure seeking support for the Trust. Another brochure that we put out at that time, it's too small for you to read, so let me just say stage by stage, and it's already been said really, we hope to have holidays for children's groups, conferences, retreats and training events, residential respite and recreation, and study facilities. And it's humbling to have such proof around us today that the aims we stated right there at the beginning are now being achieved. And I pay tribute to Simon for achieving this since he took over in 2003. He reminded me after this morning he came in 2002. I said, we were still here, you didn't take over till 2003. That's when it all started happening. As Peter and I think, had been so busy establishing the centre and keeping things running that we never quite got to achieving some of those very necessary aims which we now see being achieved, which is great. And so it's one person building on what another has done. It's links in a chain. And it's very much what Paul said when he wrote in Corinthians, the Lord has assigned each to his task. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. And of course, those final phrases, it wouldn't happen at all unless God made it happen. So how did we come to plant that seed? What did we hear God saying to us at that time? Well, Peter, Jenny and Jill and I had been friends for many years. We went on holiday together. For many years, we'd led summer camps for 10 to 12-year-olds down on the south coast of England. I'd been working for CPS, as you heard in that original video. Peter had been an officer in local government and Jenny was teaching in an infant school. And we saw how children benefited from being in a residential situation and seeing the gospel lived out as well as taught. So why restrict that to just tents that we had at camp, which could only be in the summer months? In those days, you didn't have heat waves in October. And with my work, I was realizing how costly it had become to arrange weekends for people to gather together. And so how could this be provided more cheaply? And these thoughts were obviously buzzing around in our minds. And after camp each year, we would meet together, perhaps for a meal somewhere, halfway between each one's houses, and we would do a debriefing on camp. This particular year, we felt we needed to share with Peter and Jenny that we felt God was calling us to set up something that perhaps something based on log cabins, which would have a 12-month usage rather than canvas for just the summer, and would be both economical and available throughout the year. We were hearing God, and God guided, because as we shared that with them, to our surprise, should you ever be surprised what God does? But to our surprise, Peter and Jenny responded, they thought something like that was going to happen. They thought we were going to say something along those lines, and they believed that God was leading them in the same kind of direction. Help. And God starts revealing his plans. We need to be available to fit into them, don't we? What next? We couldn't ignore that. So we did some deciding. We decided that we needed advice, and we sought advice from different directions. We researched the need for such facilities in different parts of the country. We explored the possibilities. We realised that we needed to set up a trust so we could be tax efficient when it happened. Jill and I at that time happened to be going to our solicitor to bring our wills up to date and discover that our solicitor actually specialised in setting up charitable trusts. God has it planned. And we were guided to the minimum 3 trustees, Ian and John, who are here today. And all of them were willing to support us. That was brave of them too, wasn't it? The commitment that they were making. And a family situation at the time meant that some money would be available just at the critical time. So in that way, God provided. And so we met and we talked and we prayed together and we prayed with others. And we came to the conclusion that what we needed was a rural site, but it should be about not more than about 1.5 hours driving distance on a Friday evening for people finishing work and getting home and getting packed up and coming to a centre for the weekend. And it should be near enough to centres of population for that. So folk from built up areas like these could easily get there. That's what we had in mind. And we researched it and we discovered that there was a need for such facilities in the south, in a sort of broad corridor either side of the M4. We hadn't got it right then, had we? We looked at one place in that sort of area. They said they had cabins. They turned out to be garden sheds. And then we heard of a place in the Lake District, but that was too far from those who might benefit. It didn't fit that 1.5 hour criteria. So were we just looking for a field where we'd start and build something from scratch? But then we'd have a long period of building in which we'd have no income. That didn't seem right either. We needed God to do some guiding for us. Christmas 1995, one of our daughters and her husband were spending Christmas with us. I think it was Boxing Day and we'd gone to bed, so had they. We hadn't gone to sleep. There was a knock on the door. They said, "Are you asleep yet? We've got something here, and if we show it to you now, you might not sleep tonight." And they'd been reading a magazine, and in the magazine was an advert for a place that had 12 log cabins, a meeting hall, and you've seen it, you're in it. The Yorkshire Dales, we thought, no, if the Lake District doesn't fit the criteria, surely the Yorkshire Dales don't either. It's far too rural, far too far for anybody to get there. Until we looked at the map and realised that within 50 miles there were a great number of urban places from which people could come. Within just 75 miles or even more. We're right in the midst of it here. It's very strategically placed for exactly what we felt we were setting up. Then we needed a way to decide. Could we be confident that we'd heard God aright? And we were led to those verses relating to the call of Moses, which was the reading for today, for this reason. And in chapter 3, verse 10, God had said to Moses, "Go, I am sending you." Was God sending us to the Yorkshire Dales? Was this the place that was right for us? The rest of that story shows that Moses needed plenty of assurance that he was hearing God aright and that God really did have this work for him to do. We needed that same reassurance that we were getting this right. And at that particular time, it was the days before emails and things like that, so it was fax. Remember fax? I sent a fax to Peter, and I put these 3 things on the fax. And as I think back to this, I can't really believe I did this. But we knew nothing about the things from the advert except what was available. So I said, we need to pray 3 things. We need to pray that the vendor will be a Christian. We didn't know if he was. We need to pray that he'll be sympathetic to what we want to do. And we need to pray that he won't want all the money straight away. Now that's where I can't believe I ever wrote that. But I did. And we were praying that. We'd seen the advert. We made an arrangement to come up here and visit. I was up in this neck of the woods with my work with CPS, so Jill and I came separately from Peter and Jenny. I was in a blue car. Peter and Jenny, I can't remember what colour their car was at the time. This is significant later. It's not just rambling. And we came up here. It was quite dull. It was a Friday in January. We came to Leyburn first, and it was so dull. I think there was only one stall in Leyburn Marketplace on that Friday. It was really damp and miserable and not at all like it is now. That was the start. We came along here, we came, knocked on the door, and we met Tom and Judy Walters. Come in and talk about the possibilities. Well, it was particularly clear straight away that Tom was a Christian. First thing. We then talked about what we wanted to do, and we discovered he was very sympathetic to what we wanted to do. In fact, he'd had 2 or 3 other people inquiring, and he wasn't happy with what they wanted to use the place for. It's going, number 2 was going in the right direction. And then all of a sudden, Judy Walters said, Tom, you know, they won't want to pay for it all at once, will they? Can we phase it over 3 years? So I had written the right thing, or the prayer had been answered, or something. God was certainly in it. Now, at one stage we had some people visiting, and I always remember the person said, when I come to here and I pull back the curtains in the morning and I look out on that, I say, wow. And she turned to us, who lived by then here, and said, have you lost your wow? You know, you got so used to it, you don't appreciate it anymore. And we've always remembered that. Or when Judy Walters said, they won't want to pay for it all at once, will they? Wow. And so we proved that God would provide. And then we realized the significance of those verses about Moses. God proved his will to Moses, who wasn't very ready to accept that he'd got it right. 3 things. You've got a staff in your hand, throw it on the ground. It became a stake. Pick it up. It was a staff again. Moses still doubted. Put your hand inside your cloak. Pull it out again. It's leprous. Put it back in. Pull it out. It's clean again. Set 2 things. And then the third one. Take some water from the Nile. Pour it on the ground. And it'll turn to blood. Moses needed 3 ways to convince him that he was right. In that memo, in that fax, and in the answers to the fax, in 3 ways God had proved things to us. And so, a little bit later in January, we arranged for trustees to come up. No good Pete and I deciding it was right. The trustees were going to be responsible for this. And Peter, Ian and John arranged to come up. I came up the day before. It was snowy weather. That's the snowiest slide I had. It was snowy weather. I'd coming from the north somewhere, so I went to come over from Swaledale over the top and realised there was no possibility. The roads were too slippery, so I had to come back round Leyburn and in along Wensleydale. And I spent the night with Tom and Judy. Spent the night in their guest room in the house, which was nearly as big as this. It had windows on 3 sides. It had an ensuite bathroom which was half the size of this. And I slept with the curtains open. When I woke up in the morning, there was horizontal snow outside all these windows. I looked out, it was just a white blanket. Went down to breakfast and they said, well, I don't think your trustees are going to get here. And I thought, well, gosh, what's happening now? God had guided us plainly up to this point. And they had some stage, I should have put this in earlier, I think, at some stage they had shared that somebody who was staying here had said to them, when they knew they wanted to sell it, that you'll be selling it to people and two men will come in a red car. We thought originally, well, I'd come in a blue car with Jill and Peter and Jenny had come together, that didn't fit. Then the first people to get through into Redmire that morning were John and Ian in a red car. God has his plans, which are beyond us. And so the date was agreed. The date of the handover, October the 1st. Yesterday, Simon was objecting to the fact that we'd started on October the 1st, because that meant we're having this gathering on October the 1st, and he wouldn't be able to watch the rugby this morning. We can't go back and undo things that have been done that time ago. And so here we were, we took over. People were living in the bit above here, so we set up our office in the kitchen here to begin with. That was the start of things. Just before that, of course, we'd gone through the stage. There were other things to be done. We needed houses, Peter and Jenny and Jill and I. There were 3 houses for sale in Redmire. One was withdrawn from the market and the people still live in it. And the other 2 were available and we moved. We had to resign from the safe jobs that we had at the time and go forward in faith. We made sure we introduced ourselves to the bishop and to the retiring bishop of Vicar of Redmire in that time, that we were coming to set up a Christian work here. And then we agreed that start date. And so 4 novices started a new life here in Redmire. And so we needed a lot of guiding by God and guiding by people who knew how to do things better than we did. There was a lot of deciding to be done, some by common sense, making decisions around the place, and some by prayer. And we experienced a lot of providing. God provided us with the wisdom that we needed, the help that we needed, and the money that we needed. Wow. So Pete and I started off things, 2 rookies as far as running a place like this was concerned, but there we are. And on that Sunday evening, Tom always used to have a gathering of guests or anybody else who liked to come in the lounge in the big house. So we went to that first Sunday evening, and he sort of considered it as a sort of handover service. We were there, and we'd taken the decision that day that we'd take over the top of this and we'd make the offices and things into the top here. And Jenny found herself sitting by somebody in Tom's meeting who said, I just love coming here. I always stay in the flat above the granary barn. In fact, I suggested at the time if I had the opportunity, I'd buy it. I'd love to come back there. Jenny didn't have the heart to say, well, we won't be able to. It's turning into an office. And we had help that was needed. Jenny and Jill doing a lot of the cleaning and the laundry, which they've never enjoyed doing. Think back on with mixed feelings. We got students in to help us clean on changeover day on Saturday. That had mixed blessings too. We were grateful for Debbie Jordan, who used to come and help look after the animals in the early days. And Peter Dinsdale, who helped in some of the practical ways, built those steps that you walk down from the top and expect to get here just now, and converted things in the cabins and helped us convert a hay barn in the courtyard of the house to make a place where we could do children's work. That God provided the help and the people that we needed. Wow. And so we began to do children's work. When we had children here, we would give them rides on the horses and the ponies. And Peter loved doing that after having worked in an office most of his life. And always remember the first time we thought children were offering a ride on the ponies like Tom used to. So we went to where the saddles were, and then we looked at the saddle and we looked at the horse and thought, which way round does it go? Health and safety, I'm not sure. Then we did occasional times, we did catering, or people catered themselves. Occasionally they did the catering. And Peter and I got it down to a fine art that if people had a meeting in here, and then we were serving them with lunch, we'd say, go out of the way, don't stay and help us, move out please. And I think the quickest we changed this from this to that was 6 minutes. We got very clever at doing that. And we moved our camp up from the south coast of England, had it here for a few years. We had working parties. Some of my ex-colleagues from CPS came and they had a staff conference, which we let them come for nothing, as long as they did some work while they were here, and they helped with practical things around the site. And I always remember Judy Walters watching one of them doing up a big pot, cast iron plant pot, I think, in the courtyard of the house, and scrubbing it down and painting it, and said, oh, that lady made a very good job of that. What does she do normally? I said, well, she's a bishop's wife, actually. And then we started, we had Sunday at 8, every Sunday evening, a gathering here, which some of you came to. And we had Rip Club, which was read by young people for children from the village on a Wednesday evening for games and some Bible teaching. So things began to take off. We were doing all those sort of things. We were younger in those days. And then we stated those as our financial targets. It doesn't matter you can't read it, just as I can read it and think, gosh, did we really face that in the early days? That says 1 year 560,000, next year 590,000, the next year 600,000. And we had that worry each time it was coming to a deadline. But, wow, God always provided, because God knew, even if we doubted. We had the support from the trustees, for which we were grateful, particularly John here, who used to come up a couple of times a year and sort out figures with letters. I mean, it's PAYE and VAT and things like that, which we'd rather not do ourselves. So God really did provide. And that was wonderful. Wow. He provided money. Well, it's his, isn't it, in the first place? He provided manpower. Or I could say woman power with Julia here this afternoon. We remember Julia's marvellous support that we had for a while. Julia would tackle anything, wouldn't you? And Jenny reminded me that Julia always wanted to crack on with something. You still crack on? Yeah, Julia cracked on with it. And Matt's here as well, and Matt was wonderful in the practical things around the site, digging and mowing, looking after the animals and painting. Has that had a coat of paint since you last? Yeah. And Matt with ladders was wonderful. Put an extension ladder up against a tree and tie it to the top with his belt, then climb up and cut some branches off so the brow got lighter and went up and the ladder left the ground at the bottom. And then the other thing Matt was good at was helping us move phone boxes. Used to be in the courtyard. Somehow with block and tackle and all sorts of things, we got it out of the courtyard and put it over there. Because it was the days before mobile phones even. Surprising what's happened in 15 years, isn't it? And Jenny remembers us once praying that we would give a really warm welcome to some guests who were coming. And by the time they came, there was a fire engine in the courtyard. Because Tom and Judy's chimney had caught fire. Nothing to do with us. So, but we never really made those necessary contacts for the midweek use. We tried to get schools in and didn't get a response. And we didn't get those contacts with social services and organisations like CAP that Simon has done. We got so far, but no further. And the original brochure talked about this residential respite and recreation for carers and disadvantaged families. That was still to come in its fullness of time. But Peter and Jenny included this, which I quote, in a recent email. The feel of the centre was always changing. At times when there were no guests, it was so peaceful with those amazing views over to Pen Hill. And then with guests, it was buzzing with lots of movement and children's excited chatter and laughter. How privileged we are to have been part of the past of the centre. A very special time in our life. God is in control of the whole site. And we're thankful to him for all his strength and wisdom given to us when we needed it most. And Jill and I would say amen to that. So, what of the future? Well, I believe that God will continue to guide as the Jonas Trust moves forward into Project Noah. He's guided so far, he will continue to guide. Simon and others with him will have plenty to decide relating to the details of that project. But most of all, God will continually provide for the needs. He's proved that he's done in the past, the present, and I'm sure he will in the future, because this is his work. It was God who gave us the vision for it in the first place. Returning to Moses, I read this recently, and how accurate this is, I don't know, but it's quite a thought. If Moses was going to lead 2 or 3 million people out of Egypt, I'm not sure where somebody got that figure from, but somebody might like to tell me whether it's right or not. If Moses was going to lead 2 or 3 million people out of Egypt, they would need 1,500 tons of food a day, 4,000 tons of firewood to cook it, 11 million gallons of water each day to drink and wash, and 750 square miles of campsite each night. Did Moses figure this all out before he left Egypt? I think not. He believed in God, and God took care of all these things for him. And so I'd repeat the verses that Simon meant a lot to him and Joe when they came up here. God knows the plans he has, plans for a hope and a future. Some years ago, George Muller was led by God to set up children's homes in Bristol for disadvantaged children and orphans and things. And very often they didn't know where the next meal was coming from. And there was one particular morning when he brought the children up, sat them around the table and said grace, knowing that there wasn't any food at all in the house. As I said the amen to the grace, there was a knock on the door, and there was a baker saying, "Can you make any use of this bread?" And George Muller then went on to say, faith does not operate in the realms of the possible. There's no glory to God in that which is humanly possible. Faith begins where man's power ends. And for the Jonas Trust, the present is a blessing to others. The past proves that God wants to bless the work. Now go into the future, knowing that many more lives will be touched and blessed, because the Jonas Centre is here.